the night that Mick Foley truly put butts in seats. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WWE Raw from January 4th, 1999. And I say January 4th, 1999, because even though this aired on January 4th, it actually was taped a week prior in Worcester, Massachusetts. So a taped Raw against a live Nitro in the Georgia Dome. A lot more fans can fit in the Georgia Dome than whatever the fuck building they ran for Worcester, Massachusetts. And guess which show won? I'll tell you which one won. It wasn't the big fan-attended show. It wasn't the stadium-sized TV taping. You know why? Because WCW, in their infinite wisdom / idiocy, decided to do the finger bang poke of doom. And then, even though Nitro would still do well in the ratings, and even though Super Brawl 9 would do pretty good as far as buy rates, actually almost 500,000 buys, things would really start to go downhill really quickly. And by the time we got to May and June, the ratings had bottomed out. So while it wasn't immediately felt, it was a death knell for WCW. Good job, Bischoff, letting the inmates run the asylum. And all the other stuff that happened. It wasn't just solely Bischoff. It was a lot of corporate greed. And yes, the corporate turnover and everything. And the upcoming AOL Time Warner merger that would, take a year to mature once January 2000 came around. A whole bunch of other stuff that's been told about. And yes, I did actually do a mashup of both of these shows 5 years ago. And I decided, you know what? I enjoyed doing certain mashups of Raw and Nitro, Human Centipede together in one video. And even though I would go long, I decided to do individual reviews. Why? Because honestly, with the 25 years since these particular episodes took place head-to-head, sure, Nitro won the overrun. Guess who won the overall ratings? Yeah, Mick Foley put some butts in seats because Bischoff said, hey, Shivani, or whoever, why don't you say that Foley's going to win their world title and make it all snide and just make it like it's the worst thing in the world. And then we dump on Tony Schiavone, even though Schiavone was just doing what he was told. Taking the shots at that point was having an adverse effect against WCW. At first, WCW was, getting ratings victories and all the stuff that was going on in 1995 and 96. And then they were smashing WWF for a while. And then it was neck and neck in 98. And the ratings were still close to this point, even though WCW had pretty much screwed up everything. They'd had Goldberg lose his streak and all that. And I'll talk about that on the Nitro thing. It's just, and this was a 2-hour taped show against a 3-hour live Nitro. Too much television, live television on a Monday night, can drain an audience. Anyway, this was taped and still had loud crowd pops. And it was a snowy night in Worcester, Massachusetts. Shawn Michaels was fired by Vince McMahon because Shawn was a commissioner and Vince was sick of him, and all this stuff happened to Shane. And then Vince cut it off and brought the corporation with him. You had Kane there, the Stooges, Patterson, who had nothing to do with anything that happened in 1992. He wasn't at all, like Mel Phillips and stuff like that. But nevertheless, just ignore that. Mel Phillips was definitely a piece of shit. You had Gerald Brisco, who was the worst of the two as far as a singles wrestler. He was actually good. But Jack Brisco was the much, much better, more well-known in-ring talent. Because who was Gerald Brisco without Jack Brisco teaming with him? So nevertheless, you also had Ken Shamrock and the Big Boss Man, the tag team champions. And Ken Shamrock was also the Intercontinental Champion. You had Test in the infancy of his WWF run. And you had The Rock, the corporate champion, who had turned and then turned back at Survivor Series and they were taking it away, and they were going to make it where he was going to be top. No, he was going to be cheered. He was going to be cheered wildly. And I will let you know that this also featured one of the worst angles ever put on WWF television. If you don't think I'm not going to immediately aim both barrels and then both just like cannons at goddamn Russo and Ferrara, you don't know me very well, and I'll just say that I can't even come close to summarizing how somebody else feels about Russo. Yeah, I do listen to the podcast. Not agreeing with every single point doesn't mean you can't listen to the podcast of a particular person that knows more about wrestling history than I could ever know just as a fan. That being said, Shawn Michaels will not be here tonight. Asshole chance. Vince says, well, Shawn will get taken out if he shows up. And whoever scarred Shane emotionally will pay. Here's Shawn with DX. And this took 12 minutes. It did go a bit. I mean, opening promos going long. I mean, it's like nothing's ever changed in the last 25 years. He answers to no one. I'm going to be the commissioner until I want to resign, and I have no plans to resign. And I promise you a stone cold surprise. Oh, no. This is a taped Raw, by the way, so Stone Cold was probably already in the building. And then Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler were calling the action. This took 12 minutes, and that's including the video package being cut off. In, out, got done. Vince would get better on promos, though, because Vince really kind of stumbled over some things and kind of seemed a little bit lost at times. That being said, the reason that Michael Cole was calling the action and not JR like usual is JR, unfortunately, at Capital Carnage, just about 3 weeks prior, his mother, I believe, had passed away, if I recall correctly, and he had a second bout with Bell's palsy and was out for a few months. I think he came back officially for the main event at if I remember right, Monday night, the main event of Stone Cold versus Rock at Mania 15. I know they'd had him do some heel stuff where he would have a commentate, booth or, a table in front of Jerry Lawler and Cole, and it wasn't good because nobody wanted to boo JR. Nobody wanted to. So anyway, Ken Shamrock took on Steve Blackman, who was cold as ice and willing to beat the shit out of everyone. I'll let you decide which one I'm thinking about. Actually, both of them are legit tough, and Dan Severn showed up during this. None of the matches really meant anything. I'm not going to go blow by blow, easy for me to say. But Dan Severn showed up in a neck brace. Dan Severn didn't want to be part of the the ministry and have 666 put on his forehead. Gee, I can't imagine why. Dan Severn, legit badass, and also a guy that probably could have beaten the shit out of most of the goddamn locker room if he wanted to. But anyway, he shows up and ends up inadvertently distracting Shamrock. And Billy Gunn, who has been wanting an Intercontinental title shot from Shamrock, comes down, hits the famouser. Steve Blackman gets the cover. 1, 2, 3, even though Blackman probably could have taken Shamrock by the skin of his teats. I think that's how you say it. But nevertheless, that is what ended up happening. And Shamrock runs after Billy. And then we go to the WWF Rewind, that was sponsored by 10-10-220. Who remembers 10-10-220? Like when I hear collect, it's like all those numbers you could like call for a cheap rate. It's back before cell phones really became the norm. Who still has a landline? Put your hand up in the comment if you still have a landline. Genuinely, I want to know, because I do, because we don't have the best cell signal area here if the internet goes out. So anyway, backstage, Shamrock and Billy are brawling. Obviously, this would lead to them wrestling at the Royal Rumble 99. That I believe I already retro-reviewed. If it has been a number of years, I might go back and redo it. We will see. But here's Mankind. And he's all smiles, self-defecating humor. I think that's what that phrase sounds like. And that he says, I like kicking the McMahon's family asses. And beat up Patterson, grabbed his testicles. Yeah, Patterson, you don't like when somebody else violates you, do you? Maybe you shouldn't have done that with the Ring Boys, allegedly. So anyway, the Roddy Piper clip, just want to say it. He wants a shot at The Rock, at the Rumble. Vince shows up and says, if you'd listened to me, you would be champion. You didn't, and no, you don't deserve a shot. You had your chance, you blew it. And if you pay your dues, maybe you'll get back to the Hardcore Championship. But I'll tell you what, I'm a, benevolent individual. How about I give you a match versus Triple H, and the winner goes to the Royal Rumble. So Chyna and her friend are backstage, and then Mark Henry takes on Goldust in a match that I honestly forgot these two ever faced each other, even though I know they worked in the company, respectively, multiple times over certain periods. I just always forget that they work together. And it took a while for Mark Henry to get it, mainly because of injuries and just whatever. He eventually did. A little bit too late because injuries are catching, but the Hall of Pain stuff was pretty good. Then Chyna and her friends show up. Shattered Dreams causes a DQ. This is not the only DQ finish that we would get on this night. And here's a question. So Mark Henry won by DQ. Why did Goldust theme hit? Who knows? China then basically says, I'm not a woman enough for you. So how about me and my friend Sammy? I think Sammy was the name. I don't care. How about we take a little bit off your mind? How about a three-way? She says what I was saying, three-way. And then they made a transvestite joke the next week. Yay! It wasn't all great in the Attitude Era. There's a great part of the Attitude Era, the main event angles, and a lot of the shit that really, really clicks still, and the big reactions, and the best parts of, Crash TV, so to speak, because Vince McMahon was smart enough to reshape Russo's ideas. Unfortunately, there's the bad aspects, and that was one of them. Also this, Dennis Knight being chained up somewhere. Because, goddammit, Southern Justice didn't work out, so we're not going to make him a hog farmer. Let's chain him up somewhere. Okay, where is he? Who fucking cares? Let's go to Godfather bringing out the hose to face Test, who had a very weird theme. And I'm sure some of the stuff might have been dubbed over, but really. And this match really wasn't awful, but didn't really get much of a chance to start. Val Venus ends up showing up, and Val Venus and Test have been feuding, or at least having skirmishes, and then we get a DQ. That's the second DQ in a row. Not the last bullshit finish we get. More on that later. And then Shawn and DX are yucking it up backstage. And remember the N64 game Glover? Well, yeah, it sponsored another rewind. That was the Mankind Shane stuff from a couple weeks before. So Triple H versus Mankind with Shane McMahon as a special guest referee. That was something that Vince McMahon mentioned a little bit earlier in his promo, and I was so fired up, but forgot to mention it. But yeah, he talks about that. You're going to, have my son Shane as the referee. Both these guys knew what was going on. At first, they were kind of playing around, then he got a little more aggressive. And then there was a sunset flip. Mankind got his feet on the ropes, or his hand on the rope. Shane kicked him away and fast counted like Nick Patrick should have, but didn't, because Nick Patrick didn't know how to fast count. So Triple H says, Mick. It's Mick. It's all about the WWF Championship. It's just business. I'll take this shot any way I can get it. And Shane's holding his hand up. You can see it coming. But, Mick, have a nice day. And Mick, Happy New Year. And he did that and kicked Shane in the gut, hit him with a pedigree, and just went like this. Go ahead. And then Mankind got him in a hold, trapped his arm, and basically said, Vince, come on out. And Vince and the Stooges come out, and then he says, don't come any closer or I'll snap his arm. And he says, I don't want to wait till the Rumble. I want a shot tonight. And he's like, you gonna give it? He goes, I'll snap his arm. Mankind getting a little angrier, going a little Cactus Jack-like. Just a little bit. Just enough. Just enough to remind you he ain't the lovable clown that he, had to be after Hell in a Cell basically almost killed him. Thankfully it didn't. I don't know how he survived that. Vince says, fine, you get that. And says, how about no DQ? Fine, you get that. We've got ourselves a little deal. And then he lets Shane go. And The Rock's pissed. The Rock's not ready to wrestle. This is when The Rock was in warm-ups and a big shirt because he had, surgery because of certain, enhancements that he took. Performance-enhancing supplements. Let's just say it. He took roids. That's what he took. Roids or HGH. It was one of the two. But he had to have certain things done to his man titties. It's not funny. Let's just not laugh about that. Let's not laugh about this next thing either. Edge and D'Lo had a match that actually wasn't all that bad. But unfortunately, they showed recaps of D'Lo basically calling PMS a couple of rats. And So yeah. Jesus. By the way, Terry and Jackie were known as PMS. Pretty Mean Sisters. They show up and Michael Cole says, it must be that time of the month. Jesus, Cole. Okay, let's just fucking get into it. Okay, so we have Terry get up on the steps. She's supposed to be like 3 months pregnant. Even though Terry was always, and still is, like really thin. And not thin in a sick way. She's very slight. And she ends up taking a halfway decent bump off the steps. She was never a wrestler, but she understood wrestling, and she knew that, and she was a great valet. York Foundation, an underappreciated stable in my personal opinion. But she takes a stumble and then is holding her stomach and doing all this, and she's doing all this, and I'm gritting my teeth talking about this. Because Terry didn't want to do this. She didn't want her daughter to see this. She maybe knew women that had miscarriages. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not diving into her personal life, but she didn't want to do this. And she's having to act her goddamn ass off, and credit to her. But Jesus Christ, this fucking angle. Fuck Russo and Ferrara. What happened? You know, she's yelling, what happened? And they're saying, the crowd's saying, D'Lo sucks. He didn't do anything. And the paramedics show up with a sheet. It's like she was gonna die and they were gonna wrap her up in it. I don't think these paramedics knew what the fuck they were doing. And then Terry didn't deserve this. Nobody deserved this goddamn thing. She's taken backstage, and then I'm just gonna snap a little bit. She's taken backstage, and the doctor, I can hear the baby's heartbeat. And Terry cries. And I'm just going to say right fucking now that this right here should have caused Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara to be left in a ditch. Preferably make their families watch while they're left in goddamn ditches, assuming that Ferrara's family actually wanted anything to do with him. I maybe think that he was actually a baby that was left in the woods and raised by wolves that immediately abandoned him. And somehow maybe he gained the power of speech by being raised by a blind family. You know, maybe the mother had cataracts and one eye was blind, the other. I'm not necessarily certain. That being said, Ed Ferrara, that noted piece of shit that wanted to make fun of JR's Bell's palsy, let's just say when Ed Ferrara has any medical issues, if that happens to happen, nobody should help him. Why? You want to mock somebody like that because they fired you, because they were better at their job on their worst day than you would ever be on your best day. And you've never had any best days at Ferrara, but he was on the writing team. And him and Russo were in lockstep. But Vince Russo, on this day, WWE put this tweet out, so shout out to that Twitter. But there was an old clip from an old shoot interview from Russo, and Terry didn't want to do this. It's a TV show. Let me tell you what this fucking was. Vince Russo, you goddamn piece of shit. What if your mother had a miscarriage? Oh, you wouldn't be here and the wrestling business would be better off. And I wouldn't wish that on your mother, but at least the wrestling business would be better off. She could have had a kid a lot better than you. Hopefully both your parents aren't here anymore, so they don't have to hear you say stuff like this. There are women that can't have children, women that constantly have issues and can't carry kids to full term. Terry maybe didn't know anybody personally. I don't know, but Terry didn't want to do this because Terry is a smart, talented, respectable woman that would do anything for wrestling, but even she had limits. But oh, it's a TV show. It's a TV show. What if your wife, who must have no goddamn standards at all to marry somebody like you, ended up having a miscarriage and one or neither of your kids were here? Would you still want to do that then? What if you knew somebody in your immediate circle? What if somebody came up backstage, and said, that angle that you did, that angle that you pitched, and I know it was you, Vince, I had a family member, or I had a girlfriend, or I had somebody, insert name here, that just had one. So how about I put you against the wall and squeeze you until you can't even move anymore? Because somebody could have done that and would have been justified in doing that. I'm not saying I would do that, but remember something that Cornette said on the Dark Side of the Ring, the Brawl for All? That he will live to piss on Vince Russo's grave, and hate is a hell of a motivator. I think wrestling fans should take up that mindset. I think wrestling fans should find out where Vince Russo is buried, and hopefully we can outlive Vince Russo. And we can do that. And we can piss on his grave for what he did to wrestling. Yes, it's a TV show. Yes, it's a line of athletic entertainment and sport and theater. But there is a bit of taste and tact here. And then he just did a whole bunch of other bullshit in WCW, but said it was entertainment and could never draw anything properly and didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He never understood wrestling. He didn't like wrestling. That was proof with the Bash at the Beach episode, which honestly, even though I'm no fan of Hulk Hogan for all his dalliances and all the shit that he's done, Hogan would have been perfectly within his goddamn right to beat the shit out of Russo, and I would have loved to have goddamn seen it. And Russo wouldn't have been able to fight back. Russo couldn't win a fight against anybody. He couldn't win a fight against a fan. He couldn't win a fight against any of his peers. Everybody would just laugh at him as he tries to swing. It would look like that one, video where somebody's holding, somebody back, holding one of those short people back, and their little buggy arms are just doing this. I got no goddamn, ACL in one particular knee, and my next shot, you know what? I could win a fight against Russo, and I don't fight people. But wrestling fans should be willing to do something about this, and still, 25 years later, they should be allowed to call and harass Russo for something like this. It's a TV show. That is somebody's livelihood. That could scar somebody. That could cause somebody to not want to be here anymore. But it's a TV show. It didn't draw shit. It didn't pop a rating. All it did was pop what little credibility you might have had. And this is shortly after he had done something like Hawk falling off the Titantron. That terrible goddamn thing. But it's a TV show. It's a TV show that you never deserve to write. And hopefully, Russo, when you do die, it's in the worst way possible. And nobody can even identify your corpse. And maybe, just maybe, all the shit that you did and all the lives you ruined, it'll come back to bite you tenfold, and then nobody will have anything good to say about you. If I was your family, I'd abandon you. If I was your parents, I would have never wanted to even acknowledge that you were my kid. Fortunately, I've never had kids, because thank God, if I ever did, I'll tell you this, they turned out a hell of a lot better than you ever did. And once again, Ed Ferrara, you piece of shit, I hope that you have the worst year possible. And I hope both of them never find work in wrestling again. They never deserved it in the first place. So, let's get back to the review. Yeah, Terry, poor Terry. Once again, poor Terry Runnels. Runnels, or whatever her name is now. I'm actually genuinely not sure what her name is, but Terry should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. But put Terry in the Hall of Fame. They put other people in there for less. She actually is a memorable character. And I mean that. Anyway, poor Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole decide to basically get pretty, upset over this, but try to disguise it as, holy shit, yeah. Kane then beats up the Stooges because they didn't protect Shane. And then he tries to choke Shane out. But, you'll go back to the asylum. You're going to go back, because this is when they were putting Kane in the asylum and they had White Coat show up and trap Kane. And all this was terrible. It was terrible television. Dennis is still chained up. The Acolytes show up and pull Dennis away and say, he's ready for you. No. Al Snow then took on Road Dogg. Road Dogg, who recently said he's a better sports entertainer than MJF. I'm not going to deny that most people don't remember a lot of Road Dogg's promos. You know what we don't remember? Road Dogg's matches. You know what we remember more? MJF's promos and matches. Bullet Bob should still be here and not you, Road Dogg. And people say that he, had a recent heart issue, so maybe he's nicer. Road Dogg doesn't have a heart. People that think the way he does don't have hearts. Maybe his wife and children will leave him. That'd be nice. He doesn't deserve that kind of happiness. That piece of shit goes after people, attacking them because they don't agree with him, in his particular views. And I'm talking about going after social media. I'll do it here. I don't fucking care, because I don't really give a shit. I honestly hope Road Dogg has a goddamn miserable time. He never deserved to be brought back to WWE. Further proof that Triple H will just hire his friends. Shawn Michaels at least contributed something positive to wrestling. Name one good Road Dogg match where he wasn't carried by somebody else. I'm waiting. I'm genuinely waiting. I'm talking singles match. I'm not talking tag. I'm not talking multi-man matches. So Al used Head as a distraction, as you do. And he's so covered in blood after a bloodbath, I think he decided not to wash his stuff because it's a job squad, because they just get pinned. Pin me, pay me. I actually knew a guy in high school that had a job squad shirt. Also knew a girl that had a job squad shirt. I won't tell you which one was the top. I can't talk about any of that because the statute of limitations, unfortunately, hasn't ran out. Let's just say that the theater stage at the high school had to be steam cleaned. Moving on from that, they basically battle a little bit. Al goes through a table after moonsaulting one. When Road Dogg moves out of the way, Al goes through another table by the stage. They battle backstage. There's a toilet paper box involved. And then, who was the 30s PI, private investigator guy back there? There was just some guy in a goddamn hat. It was almost like Kojak. Who was that guy? Look when, I think, just before or just after they start throwing the potted plants. There's like this shot of this cop and this private eye just in a brown coat. Just standing there. It makes no... I never even noticed it before. Anyway, so potted plants. One hit Road Dogg in the head. Don't worry, it won't cause any brain damage for somebody that didn't have one to begin with. And Road Dogg got piped at one point. Oh, you didn't know. And they went out in the snow in Massachusetts. Even if this was taped before and people were like, oh, it has to be 20 degrees. The way they were rolling that goddamn stuff, or rolling a cart with Road Dogg on it. Now, I mean, I don't know what the temperature was. I've never been in Massachusetts in winter. I don't like the winters here, so I don't plan on doing that. But the way the tires are rolling through the snow, it was wet snow. And I would say it was probably in the mid-30s. Maybe close to freezing, but probably mid-30s. So anyway, then there's a cone shot. Jerry Lawler had one good line. That's a snow cone. That was pretty funny, admittedly. He probably wants to give his, girlfriend a snow cone, considering that she's allowed at carnivals and he's not legally allowed there. So, yeah, pile driver on some pallets, 1, 2, 3. I bet both were really fucking cold after that. But then again, Road Dogg's cold-hearted, so who fucking knows. So Dennis Knight is taken to a 15th century castle and thrown in. Where was this castle? Where was this lair that The Undertaker had? Shawn then gets some keys from Triple H. He's going to leave, get the Stone Cold surprise. And then DX basically says what goes around comes around, because they remember how Shawn treated them. How he just basically left shortly after WrestleMania to get help. It's because of his bad back. It's because of his back. Despite the fact he was back on television pretty quickly. Yeah, he couldn't take bumps necessarily. But he was moving pretty good for a guy that had a career-ending back injury. It's because, unfortunately, he was on a whole lot of pills. I'm not saying the back injury wasn't legit in some instance, but he needed a lot of help. And he got it. He traded one addiction for another, but nevertheless. So he ends up getting beat up by the Big Boss Man and who knows, possibly the cameraman. Maybe the cameraman didn't like Shawn Michaels. And then he's put through a windshield and all bloodied up. Darn. Mankind with DX versus The Rock with the Corporation. I'm not going to go through all this stuff. The whole thing's available on YouTube. That match has been talked about like crazy. Hell of an atmosphere on a taped Raw once again. And they do the big thing where Mankind's got, since it's no DQ, Mankind's got the Mr. Sacco on. Shamrock hits a chair. And boom, the DX and the corporate team are going at Austin's music, glass shatters, huge pop, comes down, chair shot, fully on Rock. 1, 2, whoever the fucker is that threw that drink in the ring, by the way, needed to have his hand cut off. 3, massive pop. Mick Foley, somebody that the fans genuinely liked, genuinely loved, appreciated, and wanted to see succeed. Didn't need to see all those insane bumps. Finally won the big one. He brought out for his kids. His kids were all happy. His kids were born at the time, and there you go. And it truly put butts in seats. Good job, WCW. You couldn't beat a taped Raw that was that messy. With a miscarriage angle literally 30 minutes? 30, 35 minutes before Foley won the title? Good job. Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.